I think he'll get a medical red shirt. Going to have to pay him too, along with the freshman. They need a point guard. They need another shooter. But next year could be completely different. But congrats to Buzz Williams and the Terps last night, because they have deserved better results based on how hard they have played. I wanted to stick with college hoops here for just a moment, because I've been saving this because we had Super Bowl and we had, obviously coordinator day the other day. But last week, over the weekend, when Kansas played Arizona in Lawrence, number one team in the country, undefeated, and Kansas won the game. Darren Peterson didn't play. And Max, you and I talked about Darren Peterson on Monday. He had the flu and it didn't go well. And it seems like, Bill Self and others may have been a little bit frustrated. They're kind of backtracking a little bit now. Darren Peterson, for those of you who don't know, right now would be kind of the consensus number one pick in the draft. He's really good. I mean, when you watch him play, he's really good. The problem is he doesn't play enough. Ankle injury, cramps for a few games, flu-like symptoms the other night. I got this from Sydney in D.C. Sydney writes, Sheehan, I don't want Peterson. Load managing in college is sorry. Boozer is the toughest of the top three. Wizards need him. This from Tad. Tad writes, can't believe you like Darren Peterson above the BYU or Duke kids. He's softer than Anthony Davis, referring to Peterson. I'll tell you what, man, this is going to be tough. If the Wizards end up with, say, number one overall, Darren Peterson, just for those of you that are half interested, he's the best player, I think, the most talented, the most intriguing. He scores so effortlessly. It's actually beautiful to watch at the college level. But, man, that's got to be some due diligence. That has to be some serious due diligence from Will Dawkins. Like, you got to sit down with that kid and you got to say, what happened when number one Arizona, undefeated, came to Fog Allen for a nationally televised Super Bowl weekend game? What happened? Well, I had the flu. That's not enough. What was your temperature? It better have been 103 or higher. You better have either been tied to the top side of the toilet or the bottom side of the toilet. Either one. And it didn't seem that you were. You were on the bench during the game. You got to get answers. When you're 18 and you're load managing, that's a major red flag. Sorry, it just is. I don't care what agent, what NIL, what, accountant is telling him, yeah, try not to play too much. Don't play against these teams. Whatever it is, it's an absolute red flag. I'm with you, Sydney. I am. And Tad, I do like Darren Peterson, the player. I like A.J. Devonta a lot. I do like Boozer. Boozer is tough. Boozer's a competitive, bad, you know what. He really is. That game against Carolina Saturday night was great. We didn't talk about the college basketball from Saturday, other than, I think, Max, we did talk about the Arizona-Kansas game, a game that Kansas won without Darren Peterson. Was happy to see that in front of an absolute insane Allen Fieldhouse crowd. College basketball has really had a good season so far. I hope the tournament ends up being as good as the regular season. But if you're Will Dawkins and you end up with draft lottery luck and you're sitting there and you've got Darren Peterson, Devonta, and Boozer, with Darren Peterson, that's going to have to be some of this most serious investigating, due diligence, character, all of that. I can't imagine that Bill Self and company aren't a little bit frustrated that this kid seems to sort of have issues. They play Iowa State this weekend. Iowa State's ranked 5th in the country, I believe. Something like that, right? I mean, can you imagine, Max? Yeah, Darren Peterson's not playing against Iowa State. He's got, ankle soreness. or has a toe injury.
I think that would be the final nail in the coffin for a lot of people. Because,
whoever, if this is load managing, it's some terrible advice.
Because he was out there for warm-ups when he was out for the fever. He was out in full kit, ready to go. Just didn't play.
You gotta, if that kid wasn't legitimately serious ill, I'm talking,
need to be green.
Okay, 103 might be a bit of an exaggeration, but it better have been 102 or higher. He should have been incapacitated in a bathroom somewhere, topside or kneeling next to it in one of those situations. But that doesn't appear to have been what it was. So I'm with you. I caught up on a lot of, correspondence the last 2 days after the Super Bowl, and I saw a lot of you pushing back on me saying Darren Peterson's number one. I love the talent, and I'd love to know what the threshold for an NBA GM like Will Dawkins would be. He's not going to comment on those players. I had him on the show the other day. He's not going to do that, more likely than not. I can't even remember if we talked about the draft, other than to say, that's going to be a big piece that they hopefully will be able to add. But, the next time I have him on, and I'll try to get him on before the draft in June, what do you go through when there is a bit, because you're going to go into that draft and there are going to be a lot of questions about Darren Peterson. Now, he could answer those questions over the next month and a half. Not miss a game, dominate. Kansas, makes it to the Final Four. He's the star of the tournament, and you've got no questions. But you are going to wonder, was it him? Was it somebody who was advising him, and he's just young and took the advice? You don't want to see an 18-year-old load managing in college, especially before the number one team in the country, undefeated, comes into your building. If you're not chomping at the bit to play in that game, no matter how you feel, that's a red flag. Should be. All right. Dan Quinn's going to be on the show. I actually recorded it yesterday, and we've got about 18, 19, 20 minutes with Dan Quinn. We'll play that for you at 11 a.m. So 11 a.m., the head coach, Dan Quinn. Chris Nocke's going to jump on with me at 11:35. You know what? I'm going to talk to Nockey about Darren Peterson, because he's been following the college basketball season much more I have this year. But we'll talk to Nockey, obviously, about the Terps turnaround as well. Buzz Williams was asked the other day during a press conference about being a bit detached. There's some, I think coaches shows that he hasn't been a part of that maybe he should have been. I don't know what the contract says. There have been some discussions that he's, not been as attached media-wise and otherwise, key people in the program, focused very much on his team. And he said, you've got that sound, right, Max? Yeah, this is what he said when he was asked about it on Tuesday.
In our evaluations, we can't control the injuries. That's not justification for our lack of success. I think Maryland's a great job. I am completely aware, whatever was going on the internet that said I didn't want to talk to the media, I don't know. I have not tried to dodge anything relative to the results. I've coached 19 years as a head coach. I'm completely aware of how good Maryland is and how disappointing our season has been. Our staff is continuing to study and figure out ways for improvement. But our system going forward will be more sustainable. We're excited about a lot of the things that we've learned, and there's not an excuse or justification for our lack of success other than we have to do better, and we will do better.
It was him the other day. There was a little bit more too. The fans are on him. You guys who have been around here a while know that the Maryland fan base is not very forgiving, especially when you're losing. Kevin Willard, obviously it ended ugly, but the fan base wanted him out the year before, screaming for him to get fired the year before the team last year went to the Sweet 16. They couldn't wait for Turge to depart. By the way, Mark Turgeon, new job. He's going to take a job at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. I think we talked about it last week. I'm really happy for him and his family. I know he's been itching to get back into it for a bit. But look, Buzz, all you got to do, man, is win. That's all that matters at the end of the day. This has been a rough season. I personally think this is a season where yes, teams turn it around in one season, even when they basically flip rosters. It's happened. There are several teams out there performing at a high level with basically no, similar parts from a year ago. And maybe they didn't evaluate well, and they've got to evaluate better. But next year is going to be a big year for him, no doubt. But I thought last night was really a big win for him. And you've seen the effort. You've seen the kids believe in him. It's probably more important than the media or even some of the big donors believing in him. He's got his kids believing in him, and that seems to be his MO everywhere he's gone. Even if his answers are long-winded and sometimes a little bit, over the heads of people, the bottom line is his kids seem to love him wherever he goes. He's got to win, though, at Maryland. This is the biggest job Buzz Williams has ever had. All due respect to Marquette, Virginia Tech, and Texas A&M. He's not been in a cooker like this one before. Good win for them last night. Field Yates came out with his mock draft yesterday. This would be, I think, his 1.0. Maybe it's his 2.0. And I'm getting more interested with the various, players that Washington is being assigned to in these mock drafts, because there is a wide range of those players. I'm going to give you that wide range when we come back. It's 5-6 deep at this point in mock drafts. That's next. Don't forget Dan Quinn at 11 a.m. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. Dan Quinn coming up at 11 a.m. If your heat's been running more than it should be, of course it's been partly due to the cold, but the other reason is that your window insulation has probably failed. You've got older windows and you need to swap them out for new, better insulated windows, and that's where Window Nation comes in. Right now, the pros at Window Nation can help you get new energy-efficient windows at a great price. Their current deal is buy 4, get 4 free. That's the sale going on, but add another 10% in the form of a Valentine's Day discount. And then if you choose to finance the purchase, you won't pay anything for 2 full years. No down payment, no monthly payments, and no interest charged for 2 years. Replace those older builder grade windows with custom built high quality windows from Window Nation. They measure 3 times to ensure your windows fit perfectly and keep your home comfortable all year long. They finish the job their installation crews do in a day or less. You can enjoy the rest of your day with minimal disruption. Get the windows you want to protect and beautify your home. You can choose from over 1,500 styles and colors, and you'll get a lifetime warranty on their windows as well. Literally no risk. Call them at 866-90-NATION or head to windownation.com to schedule your fast, free in-home estimate. They'll come out in an hour or less. You'll have a quote. They won't pressure you into making a decision, and it's something that you can go ahead and shop. I don't think you'll find a better deal. You won't work with a better company, and the product is top shelf. windownation.com. Mention my name. So I was looking at a bunch of the mock drafts last night, this morning, and even during the last break because I had forgotten that there were a couple of others that I had not looked at. It's amazing, man, how many different players have been mocked to Washington at number 7 overall. And I'm going to give you the list of those players in a moment. But I'm telling you right now, not that you guys don't know this, but given their lack of overall, talent, like their roster right now in the NFC East, the roster to roster to roster to roster comparison of the 4 teams, you can easily make the case that Washington has the worst roster in the NFC East and really one of the worst overall rosters in the NFC. Now, they have a very good quarterback. They have a very good receiver. They have a very good left tackle. And their O-line overall is pretty decent. It's a pretty decent offensive line. But we know that they are in dire need of talent defensively. In fact, one of the questions I asked Dan Quinn that you'll hear at 11 a.m. is, if I granted you one wish to pick a specific player at a specific position in this offseason, new player, what would it be? And you'll hear his answer coming up. But you have to add unbelievable amounts of talent defensively, and you got to add at least another legitimate speed, scoring threat on offense. But at number 7 in this draft, that appears to have 8 or 9 players that would be considered true blue chip guys, Washington's at the back end of that. And they're going to be kind of at the beckon, result of what happens obviously in front of them. And unfortunately for them this year, there's just not a big desire for the position that they don't need, which is quarterback. There's going to be one quarterback picked before they select at number 7, and that is going to be Fernando Mendoza at number 1 overall to the Raiders. There may not be another quarterback picked in the first round. If there is, it would appear to be Ty Simpson from Alabama, who might go at some point in the draft. It would be phenomenal if somebody fell in love with him in front of Washington, a Cleveland, or an Arizona at number 3, somebody like that, even if they traded back a little bit, to try to get into a spot. But more likely than not, it's one quarterback. That does not help Washington. The players that have been mocked to Washington, are you ready? I put this list together. It's a bunch of mocks. It's CBS Sports, ESPN, Fox, NBC, NFL.com, Pro Football Talk, Pro Football Focus, a lot of different mocks. There are 2 players that have been mocked to Washington more than any others. Caleb Downs, safety, Ohio State. David Bailey, edge, Texas Tech. Love both of those players. And, Ben Standig had in his latest mock draft, and Ben's done this right many times over the last few years, does have Caleb Downs falling to 7, Washington taking Downs there. Those two have the most that I've seen in mocks. But then Carnell Tate, wide receiver, Ohio State. I've now seen him mocked to Washington on 2 different occasions. I've seen TJ Parker, edge Clemson, to Washington at number 7. I've seen Sonny Styles, edge linebacker, Ohio State, mocked to Washington. I've seen Mekhi Lemon, wide receiver, USC, mocked to Washington at number 7. That is 8 different players. I've not seen Jeremiah Love, running back Notre Dame, mocked to Washington. If you can find that one, let me know. But man, there are a lot of options. And obviously some of those players won't be options when they are on the clock at 7. I personally think that the most important thing about the upcoming draft is that they have already, in free agency, taken care of significant needs. Free agency is for needs. The draft is for hopefully landing on a player that becomes a blue chip A+ level player. So you're drafting the best available talent. To do that in Washington's situation at number 7 on the night of April 23rd or 25th, whatever it is, Adam Peters is going to have to do one hell of a job in free agency. He's going to have to add a legitimate starting pass rusher. He's going to have to perhaps add another person who can start on that defensive line. He's going to have to add, more likely than not, a corner in free agency, another linebacker possibility, another safety as a possibility. I think 4 to 5 additions defensively where the players come in and 3 of them are already penciled in as starters, and the other 2 have a chance to start, and worst case, they're going to contribute defensively. They're going to play. They're going to be in a rotation. That's a minimum defensively. And then I think offensively in free agency, you have to address the other playmaking need. You cannot count on an NFL draft in year 1 producing the type of contribution and productivity that you're going to need next year when the hope is you can turn your season completely around and have a season similar to 2024. Sure, at number 7, we'll be excited. And if they draft Caleb Downs, or if they draft David Bailey, or if they draft Ruben Bain, by the way, Bain, of course, my fault. Bain, I left him out. 2 Bains mocked to Washington. But I've seen a lot of Bain earlier than 7. And that may be the issue with Ruben Bain. But you've got to take care of needs before the draft. Because at number 7, I want them in position to draft the absolute best player available on their board. The player that they believe, I don't care if it's offense. We did this call segment last week. Would you be upset if they drafted offense? I would not. But I also find it difficult to answer that question until I know what they've done in free agency. They've got to address needs in free agency and try to draft an absolute future blue chipper at number 7 overall. Or trade back from number 7 if there's interest in number 7 and you don't feel like the blue chipper is there. We've talked about this so many times over the years, and the idea that, trading back is, of course, the best possible result because the draft is a total crapshoot. You're, if you're hitting at a 37, 38%, 3 years down the road afterwards, that's a successful draft. So a little bit more than 1 out of 3 picks is a successful draft when you look back at it 3 years after the fact. So but you don't know which one out of the 3. That's the problem, is sometimes the teams are completely fooled. That was the guy that we weren't sure of when we picked him. Turns out to be the best player. The guy that picked number 1 wasn't. We know that from the draft. It is the one thing that NFL teams know the least about and have the least amount of success with the most amount of preparation. So volume, if 1 out of 3, let's just call it 1 out of 3 is an average, then you'd rather have 10 picks and have 3 significant contributors, 3 to 4, than just 5 picks and end up with basically 1 contributor. It's volume. You want that. Now, the one exception is if you view a draft as there are 7 blue chip players, we feel really confident these players are as much as you can describe them this way in the draft, as much can't miss as anything we've evaluated in a while. Then you got to be careful trading back. I always use this example. 2011, Washington traded back and they took Ryan Kerrigan, good player. They passed on J.J. Watt, Hall of Famer. You don't want that to happen. If you feel like at number 7, Carnell Tate, with Reuben Bain and David Bailey off the board, but you've got Carnell Tate as a future absolute superstar at wide receiver. Even if you're getting offers to trade back, you got to be careful. What are you trading back to get? Are you trading back into a first-round position that all of a sudden your board says drops off significantly from A-plus level players to B-level players? We've talked a lot about this, including with one of our guests last week. Most teams don't have 32 players with first-round grades. A typical draft for a typical team, they'll put first-round grades on maybe half the number of slots in the first round, 16. And that's why trading back always makes sense, especially when you're outside of that first-round grade area. Andrew Brandt, who was a part of the Green Bay Packers organization when they drafted Aaron Rodgers in 2005, talked about how when they got to their pick, which was, as we know, the pick right after Washington selected Jason Campbell, he talked about how they didn't have any other player, including Aaron Rodgers, with a high first-round grade. In fact, they didn't have any other players with a first-round grade. And they really didn't want to take a quarterback because they had Brett Favre. But no one wanted to trade up. And they couldn't trade back because everybody else kind of had the board the same way. Everybody else kind of saw the board as, yeah, we don't see that player. Aaron Rodgers, by the way, the pick, before Jason Campbell. I said that, and I'm like, I think it was the other way around, and I just looked it up. Yeah, Aaron Rodgers right before Jason Campbell. We have talked to Joe about this before, and even Charlie about this. Not Charlie. We've talked to Vinny about this before, that they actually would not have taken Aaron Rodgers. They had fallen in love with Jason Campbell if Rodgers had fallen. But Andrew Brandt's told us many times, like they were trying to trade out of that spot back into the second round because they didn't have any first-round grades on any players. And Aaron Rodgers was a quarterback, and they really didn't want to draft a quarterback with Brett Favre, but no one wanted to trade up. And so they just ended up selecting the highest rated player left on their board, and it happened to have been Aaron Rodgers. Yeah, interesting draft upcoming, but to me, it's starting a month essentially from today. And Adam Peters, I mean, we want to see those first few days with some of the bigger names. There needs to be some activity this year. Can't have a bunch of 1 year, mid-level, rotational kind of players. And look, not every need spot has A-level players. Trey Hendrickson is out there. Alec Pierce is out there. There are some players, but there will be high levels of competition for those players, including, in Pierce's case, from his own team, the Colts. I mean, he may not be available by the time we get there. All right, Dan Quinn coming up at 11. We'll talk to Naki next hour. When we come back, what do you got from last night's sports action? It's, to me, turning into one of the more interesting what-ifs in NBA history. That's next.
All right, quick, here's what's happening. Happy Thursday, everybody. We will start off with the Washington Wizards. They fall to the Cleveland Cavaliers 138-113 last night. Alex Sarr missed the game with right hamstring tightness. The Wizards have announced that this will sideline him for the next 2 weeks, and he will miss the Rising Stars game during All-Star Weekend. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1. You can catch programs like Take Command throughout all off-season. Don't forget to hit the like button whenever you do decide to join us and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
In Houston, the LA Clippers played the Rockets, a matchup of Kawhi Leonard against Kevin Durant. For the second night in a row, you rarely see that. They played on Tuesday night, and then they also played on Wednesday night. Same arena, same matchup. Score tied at 102 with 10 seconds to go.
Şengün is out, but Lopez stays on the floor. Here's Kawhi Leonard, spinning in the lane, elevating, shooting, giving them the lead with 2 seconds to go.
Kawhi Leonard, that's his third game winner of the season. He's an all-star, although he was not voted an all-star. He was an add-on to the all-star team, which was a complete joke. Kawhi Leonard, to me, is fast becoming one of the most interesting what-ifs in sports history. The what-if is this. What if he had been healthy for the majority of his career? The ESPN Top 75 Greatest Players list in 2022 had Kawhi at number 25 on that list. Kawhi, for those of you who don't know, is a two-time finals MVP in Toronto, and then when he was a young player in San Antonio. He's now a 7-time All-Star, 2-time NBA champion, a 7-time All-Defensive Team, and a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year. He's 34 years old, and he's on an absolute tear right now in Los Angeles. This month alone, he's averaging 28.9 points per game. He's averaging 28.3 since the beginning of January, and almost 30 points a game since the middle portion of December. The highest stretch for him and the longest stretch of at least 20 or more points in a game in his career. Last night, he scored 19 in the fourth quarter with the Clippers down at Houston, led them back, finished with 27, 12, 4 assists, and 4 steals in the game. I believe he's second in the NBA right now in steals. I've been a fan of Kawhi forever. Some of you know that and probably, feel like this is a bit of lack of objectivity. I don't think so. I mean, already the NBA writers and the NBA greats in 2022 voted him the number 25 player in the history of the game. This is a guy that has had not, load management issues as much as true injury issues, serious injury issues that have really prompted the load management part. Look, that is a part of his career that has been at times off-putting. Although he just played back-to-back nights, he's as healthy as he's been in a long time, and he's having one of the great seasons of his career at 34 years old. 27.9 points per game. He's averaging, right now, he was at 40% from three-point land and 50% from the field. Now he's 49.1% from the field, 38.3% from behind the arc. He's shooting a career-high best 91.2% from the free throw line. And right now he is averaging the second most steals in his career at 2.1 steals per game. He's an absolute monster when you watch him every night. And it starts with just watching him lock somebody down. I'm talking about locking often the best player down on the other side of the floor. Now, they're a different team. They traded Harden. They traded Zubac, who was their big guy. They've got younger players. They've been the hottest team in the NBA for a month and a half after a very poor start. Currently, they're in, that spot of play-in, and they're comfortably in the play-in, the 7 to 10 range. I think they're ninth right now. And so it'd almost be kind of hard for them to fall out of it, but they clearly made the decision that it's not about this year. It's about the future. They're playing a lot of young guys. They did bring Benedict Mathurin from Indiana in a trade for Zubac. I thought he was so good last year for Indiana in the finals, but he might have a screw loose. But he's now playing in LA, but they're very young for the most part around him. There are a couple of players that are, have some age, but I think this season, and he'll be in the All-Star game on Sunday, an All-Star game that's being played in the Clippers' new home, the Intuit Dome in Los Angeles. I think when his career is over, he's going to go down as one of the great what-ifs in the history of the game, because it's my belief that had he stayed healthy, had he been healthy during the majority of his career, which he hasn't been, that he'd be right there in the conversation of the top 10 players in the history of the game. He's one of the great clutch performers in the history of the game. His playoff numbers are through the roof. When he's been healthy in the postseason, it's been insane. I mean, even in recent years, 2 years ago when they were in the postseason and he got hurt in the postseason, he got hurt back-to-back years, but he was averaging 35 points a game. 3 years ago, 2020, 2021, or 4 years ago now, he averaged in an 11-game run in the postseason over 30 a game. You go back to when he literally strapped Toronto to his back and took them to their first ever title. He averaged 39 and 7, along with 39 and 4 with 2 steals a game. This is the greatest two-way player of his era. By the way, the Wizards may have acquired number 2 as far as that's concerned in terms of two-way players. LeBron's been exceptional too. I'm not discounting LeBron and his two-way ability. But if you want to watch one of the true unique styles, but at the same time, one of the most incredible defenders in the league play right now, he is playing at just an absolute sick level. Sucks that they decided to go full in trade because with Harden, and I'm not a big Harden fan, but the spacing of the floor much different with Harden on it. And he's played well without Harden last couple of weeks. They've won some games, including last night as an underdog at Houston. You know, while the rest of the league is load managing, or it seems like it every night, the guy that's picture was next to load managing in the dictionary isn't load managing. He went back-to-back in Houston the last 2 nights and ended up hitting the game winner after he scored 19 in the fourth quarter to beat the Rockets last night. Kawhi Leonard is going to be an interesting conversation when his career ends, because I think people who know in that sport know. They talk about him with such reverence, like if he had just stayed healthy, if he hadn't had those serious knee injuries in particular, what would it have looked like right now? It would be looking like potentially a top 10, worst case top 15 player of all time, and one of the greatest two-way players in the history of the game. That brought me to this, because I saw this from last week and held it, and it's the perfect time to play it. So, yes, another player I like a lot, Kirk Cousins. Yeah, you know who. He made the rounds on Radio Row last week, promoting sport clips, and he was sitting down with Kyle Long, who I think has done some CBS work this year. I think that's where he's been. And Kyle Long brought up Jordan Reed, speaking of what ifs, and said that you'll hear it. Kyle Long sets it up. You played with Jordan Reed. He was in my draft class, the 2013 draft class. And I want you to hear the conversation about Jordan Reed with Kirk Cousins and Kyle Long last week in Santa Clara.
By the way, you and I talked about Jordan Reed.
Yeah, off
who
camera.
Is my 2013 draft classmate.
Yes. Special.
And what did you have to say about Jordan Reed?
I just think if he could have stayed healthy and if he could have stayed with a passing attack that was going to be effective, he probably is in the Hall of Fame. But, you know, he had the concussions, and then there was some changing around him, you know, with play callers and quarterbacks and some of the pieces you need that a lot of those tight ends who go to the Hall of Fame have, that he just failed to have. But when he was at his best, I mean, it was an all-pro level player. And, you know, you feel like there was some meat left on the bone there. No fault of his own, but it's just how
he
this
was
league
so
works.
smooth with it. He was so smooth.
So hard to cover, and it was just a tough matchup because corners would cover receivers, but you'd get safeties and linebackers on Jordan.
Yes.
So when you're getting one of your best or your best receiver getting matched by a safety and a linebacker, the mismatch was just so much bigger than when you have a receiver who's really good being covered by a top corner. So just a matchup nightmare for your opponent.
Kirk Cousins talking about Jordan Reed. I think we've all had the same feeling about Jordan Reed, that if he had not had all those injuries, the concussion, number of concussions that eventually derailed his career, that his talent was so ridiculously sick that he would have been one of the all-time great pass-catching tight ends. Look, to me, the greatest what-if in franchise history is Sean Taylor. I think that's an easy number one greatest what if in franchise history. Jordan Reed might be number two. He might be number two in terms of greatest what ifs in franchise history. Do you know that the 2013 draft in which he got selected, that the story goes about that 2013 draft because they took Jordan Reed in that draft in the third round. Jordan Reed was taken by Washington in the third round, correct? Why am I blanking on this? Was he drafted in the third round? Third round, right? Yeah, third round of the of that draft. That RG3 had gone into Mike and others who were, Mike Shanahan and others who were interested in the draft and had really pushed for a wide receiver from Baylor, and I'm going to pull up the name right now because it's escaping my memory right now. There was a wide receiver from Baylor who was available in that draft. I think it was Terrence Williams, and I think the Cowboys drafted Terrence Williams. It was Terrence Williams. And he was pushing hard for Terrence Williams. And they just said to him, trust us on this one. You're going to like the pick we're going to make a lot more than Terrence Williams. And he said, I know that player you're talking about. No, Terrence Williams should be the pick. I don't know if that's exactly the way it went. That's one side of the story. But Washington ended up selecting Jordan Reed in the third round of that draft. And yeah, I think he is right there among the greatest what ifs in franchise history. Sean would be one, Jordan Reed would be two. You know, on the heels of talking about Kawhi Leonard, who I do think is going to be maybe not the greatest what if in NBA history. That's not what I'm saying. It's going to be an interesting what if, because I think people that know in the game know that if this dude had stayed healthy and hadn't missed all the games that he missed and missed all of the playoffs that he missed, the playoff games that he missed, that we'd look at him right now at 34 years old as not only, which he'll be anyway, he'll be a lock first ballot Hall of Famer, but as a top 10, worst case, top 15 player of all time. All right. We could do that on phone lines later on in the show. I wish I'd thought about that before. A little bit disorganized today, but it doesn't matter because we've got Dan Quinn coming up on the show. Excited to talk to him. He'll join us next. It's the Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. Joining me right now is our head coach, Dan Quinn. So I want to start with this. Coming off and dealing with the aftermath of the season that you just went through, first of all, it's not been something that you've experienced much in your career as a head coach. But here you are following 5-12. How have you been absorbing it? How have you been dealing with it? How's it going, in the wake of what happened in 2025?
Yeah, you know what? It's you learn, and that's what you want to dig into first, Kevin. Say, all right, this sucks. What do we learn from it? How are we going to apply it? And so, all right, full stop. 2025. It's time to move forward now and apply the things that we need to. Change is difficult. It's difficult with coaches, difficult with players. You build bonds and relationships, and there's also new energy that comes in with new people and new ideas. So there's an element of excitement that goes into that when you are building, an offense or a defense or, a new scheme or, different things that you attack each off season. And so I enjoy the building process. I enjoy connecting with the people. I enjoy, taking it to that next spot, to the next level. And that's especially true with players who are going from year one to year two, taking it further. And that type of leadership and development, like all of that is this big off season that makes it, and that's why it makes it a lot of fun too.
So my next question requires a little bit of a preface, and the preface is this. I understand that injuries aren't something coaches and GMs like to talk about. I understand that, you guys who are in the arena, in the fight, aren't in the business of using injuries as an excuse for anything. At the same time, as an observer of the league that you coach in for a little bit anyway, I know that injuries aren't necessarily an excuse. They are a reality in the sport, and they impact games and they impact seasons. So I'm not asking you to make excuses, but the ask is this. Given how many players you lost, and more importantly, how many of your best players were lost for parts of, if not most of the season, how do you and Adam and everybody else out there go about the process of legitimately evaluating what happened this year?
Yeah, I think it's a great way that you framed it also. And you may have heard me say it, it's not an excuse, but there is part of the reason. And, the silver lining is that you found out about some other players that you may not have in the same way, playing time, et cetera. You found out, what roles people can handle, what they can do. And so there's a lot that goes into it, Kev, but you're right to say that this was more, certainly than I've been a part of during all my years in the NFL for one season, but you also adapt. You say, okay, why? And how do you look at things differently? What needs to change? What needs to stay the same? And so those are all, part of like a big overview, of the program. And it allows you to dig deeper and to go further. And that's exactly what we're doing right now to make sure that all right, we never, put ourselves in this space again.
Well, that leads to this. Is there a way to kind of look at it and say, was there a reason that we were the most injured team in the league? Was it training? Was it practice time? Was it something else? Or is it just one of those years that happens every once in a while to every team?
You want to look at the types of injuries and how they happened. And did we have more soft tissue injuries than most, or, what types of injuries? So to have, multiple ACLs, a broken leg, a broken ankle, those are unusual to have that type of volume. So yeah, exactly. You wanted to dig in to say the what's and the whys and, keep layering into that. Obviously looked at everything from practice time to training camp moments and all of that. And so for us to be at our best, we know the practice is a very big piece of that, but we're still putting some of that together, Kevin, as we're going through the entire program, and you customize it by player and what the injuries were. And then you want to make sure you make the modifications to say, all right, like I said, we don't want to be in this space again. So let's not make sure it's just rinse and repeat in any way. What are the tweaks? What are the adjustments? Things that must be done differently, better, all of those things to make sure we don't find ourselves into that space.
You mentioned that, I guess one of the silver linings is you got a chance to see a lot of players, and a lot of players you weren't expecting to see because some of them weren't even on the roster. Was there a player that, either wasn't on the roster or was on the roster, but you didn't have super high expectations for, that ended up surprising you more than anybody else?
Yeah, I think there's a few, and some of them are new players that you're wanting to see. If Eckler doesn't get hurt, does Bill Crosby-Merritt have the same amount of reps? And you can kind of go into other spaces with people at for a receiver to see Jalen Lane not just as a returner, but make an impact into those spaces. So we played a lot of people at receiver, we played a lot of people at defensive end, at corner, and so to see some of those guys into that spot, like Jake Martin was one that I thought came in as a first-year player here. All right, showed he could handle bigger parts of that role. Offensive line until the end of the season was one of our spots that we did stay healthy and have good spots. But all of those ones, they might be one-offs here and there, but to see guys step into roles, Jeremy Reeves was one when we lost. Will Harris stepped in and certainly made some plays. We'd seen that on special teams easily, and so to see that carry over onto the defensive side, that was a big deal. And I would say Jordan McGee at linebacker was one that I thought showed the speed, the violence that we're looking for from the spot. So those are a few that come to mind, when you ask that.
Jacob Martin, watching him this year, just it struck me that this is a guy that you probably love in terms of the motor and the competitiveness and the kind of relentless way that he played all season.
True. That's the first pillar of being relentless, competitive, and how you're going about things. And so he had captured that right from the beginning to say, okay, here's one that's ready to take the next space and go for it at the highest level. So I'm excited to see people make the jump from year one to year two, but I'm also excited to see some of the players make the jump from year two into year three. And some of those players, I think, as you're heading into 26, you're going to say, man, okay, Dan talked about that. We see that one coming. Players like Newton and McGee and Sinnott and some others, like, okay, they got playing time, they got rolling, they're about to take on bigger roles. And those people going in from 2 to 3 or from 1 to 2, I'm anticipating them making those big jumps that we expect.
All right, let's talk about some of the changes, and let's start with offense. So why did you move on from Cliff Kingsbury?
Change at play calling is difficult. And but when we want to make sure, number one, like what's the best, option for the team of how we want to move forward. And Cliff's an excellent coach. And so sometimes even the right fit sometimes can be, off track and off space. And so for him, it was just felt like we needed to change moving forward, although difficult, just knowing, hey, this was the right space for the team. We were fortunate, to have David here. He's been part of this pipeline that we're building with Jaden. He's a big part, obviously, of what we do and how we do it. And we just wanted to make sure, that we, set ourselves up in the very best ways to go do that.
Simplifying it, is it what you described yesterday? Because you didn't speak to it in great detail, but you did say more under center, more balanced attack, more play action passes, that's what you wanted, and that's not necessarily what Cliff does. Is it as simple as saying you preferred that and that's not what you were getting?
You're close. I would say I wanted to make sure that as we're going through it, we are looking to play it aggressive, to have alignment of how we want to have a balanced attack. That really fits, for the entire team. Like, we were excited about Bill Crosby-Merritt and Chris Rodriguez and some others in the running game. We know that the play action coming off of under center is something that we can, add to, but there'll be a lot of things that fans and people that watch us will look familiar as well. So it's a blend of things that we've done well and things that we're adding to the program. But yes, that will include being under center more, both in the run game and for the play action, run action passes that come off of that. We're fortunate with Jaden, like he'd be a good player in any system, and so allow that accuracy off of play action. That'll be a big piece for us.
Was there a moment, Dan, or was it gradual, that you kind of came to feel that this is how you wanted to do it and how you wanted to see the offense called, that it was something different than what was happening? Was it a moment, or was it sort of a gradual build to coming to that conclusion?
it was a gradual build to make sure of that, because I didn't want to, look at injuries, who was here, who wasn't here, how would we feature the guy. So it was more gradual than that. And those are the tough decisions, but that's, as a head coach, that's what we have to do, and make sure the themes that we put in, the scheme that we have. We've got two really thoughtful teachers in Blau and Durante, and I'm looking forward for the players to feel that type of execution together. And so definitely gradual would have been our mindset on that.
Why Blau, and why Blau so quickly? Well,
I think first being part of the system here and knowing Jaden and how we're doing things. And so if you've been around him, you'd understand, man, this guy is a true heavy hitter. So when he was done playing a few years ago, he came here and we took a tour around to say, how would we develop you? You could feel his football acumen, right away. He had been playing, but really as a backup quarterback, he'd already been, almost a half vision of a lens as an assistant. So to see him grow, over the last 2 years, that's when it became really clear that although this trajectory was going to happen, it just so happened that he was able to speed up the process more quickly and get the chance to be, around somebody every day for 2 years. You get a real sense and a vision for that, and David certainly has that.
He's been a guy that we've all known his name, and that's unusual with a position coach when you're a fan or even somebody in the media. And the reason for that is he's kind of had this label as a real up-and-comer, for the last few years, and someone who many thought would be an OC much sooner rather than later. You've talked a little bit about it, but just explain what it is about him that made people feel that way without him having much experience.
Yeah, I think from a coaching standpoint, you want to feel somebody's vision. That's the teaching element. And the best teachers you've had through the years, those are the ones from a coaching standpoint, they can get that vision across, how to do it, what's it going to look like. And now when you can do that to an entire group, that's a really big deal, because it's scheme and it's play style and it's attitude and it's the way that you attack. And so for those things, it really is part of how he thinks on a regular basis. And he's known he was headed down this path even when he was a ball player, knowing that coaching was going to be in his future. But you're right, people would be around him to say, man, this guy is going to be a heavy hitter. And we knew it was only going to be a matter of time before, him becoming a play caller was going to be a reality. So we're excited for him to do that here. Obviously, having the knowledge of our program, what we stand for over the last 2 years, Kevin, that's important. He's not going to start from the beginning on some of those relationships of what a player can and can't do. So there's some real advantages when you can, build up from within and build that pipeline from within. And so we're really pumped about it. We really are.
Given your relationship with Mike McDaniel, did you have a conversation with him about his availability?
I talked to a lot of guys, Mike being one that was included into that. And when you go through a whole process with coaches and, where you're going, so offensively, defensively, I met with a lot of guys. And sometimes I'll visit with friends like Mike on just their point of view or their opinion on something. Sometimes just check it in after going through a tough experience like he did in Miami, man. I want to check it on the man, not the coach. And so, I talk to he and other coaches that I'm close with often, and sometimes it's football related, other times not.
For someone who's had the success that you've had as a defensive head coach and a defensive coordinator, what was the most frustrating or disappointing part of this past season defensively?
There's a lot, but I would say the play style and the speed and violence that I love when we play with. The most disappointing part was to not see that on our consistent basis. And so when you do that, when you play with that type of energy and connection and joy, then it's takeaways and great tackling and all that can bring. And so that's at the top of the pile for us to recapture that and put that into full effect. At times you can feel like you're punching off the back foot and not, hitting into the right spot, and you can be just a little off course and you're not quite there. You're not same energy to the ball, the same pursuit to it, some overthinking to go. So I'd say that would have been the thing that when you or our fans or myself or my family and friends watch us, say, man, they didn't play in that same type of energy that, like a Dan Quinn defense would have. And so that was probably the one that I know we're capable of more, and the things that keep you up at night the most.
All right, just a few more, and I appreciate the time as always. So, when the season ended, I think a lot of us guessed, and I think you almost implied shortly after when you and Adam had the season-ending press conference that somebody experienced as a defensive coordinator was probably the way to go. So why an inexperienced defensive coordinator in Durante Jones?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to you feeling that answer, because it's easy for me on the other side of the call to tell you. But when I sense somebody teaching and their acumen and the vision for it, and it becomes so clear, then some of the guidelines that you may have had say, okay, this is the best option. I've been on, my first call with him maybe 2.5 or 3 hours, and it felt like we'd been on an hour. And so even yesterday, as a presser went on for him, I'd heard from some other people, I get it now, and meaning the language, the alignment of how to coach, of what it would look like and feel like, it just connected easily. And so this one, although that may have been the best plan at that time to get started, once I went through a full process of meeting with a lot of people, then it became clear that Durante would have been the one here. And, like sometimes those plans have to shift and adjust, and that's what coaching is, man. Like where you thought maybe at the start of it before visiting with anybody, then you meet somebody, say, you know what, man, this dude right here is the one. He's the heavy hitter that we need, and this is how we, can get him here. So you go for it, and I made a lot more success being bold in my decision making than, worrying, sitting back about not enough experience or play calling. And so I'd much rather be bold and aggressive on people that are hungry and willing to go take their shot. And so guys like Blau and Durante, man, they are in those spaces and those moments, and I absolutely love that.
Interesting way that you just described the two hires. Hearing you describe the two hires as bold is the way I think many observers of the team and observers of you in particular would describe those two hires as well. Dan, after a 5-12 season, regardless of the reasons for it, and I personally think the reasons were obvious, and it was mostly about the players you didn't have playing for you this year. But that aside, in this day and age, there's going to be a feeling from the outside after a 5-12 season that next season is a big one for you. And because of that, I think a lot of people would have guessed he's going to go hire experienced, resumed play callers, coordinators, especially in a year that's going to be big for him. Does it make sense to you that people would feel that way?
I could see from the outside, why that would be a narrative or a story. But I'd also, I love the support that we were going to put around these two men. And I'm on the coaches and talking about the players and how to feature that. And quite honestly, that's part of my wheelhouse too, to make sure the leading in that way is on point and together. And so when you blend everybody's strengths and how you feature them onto a team, that's when the good stuff happens. And so I'm very much looking forward to supporting these guys, from a leadership position. I'm looking forward to them getting this vision out to the players. And when you do that together with great support from assistants, the play style right from the players, I think there'll be a lot for us to be proud of the way that we're going to attack it.
All right, last one, because the next, phase is free agency and doing stuff with your own players, potentially, who are free agents. But if I said that you get one wish granted from a personnel standpoint for a new player, not asking you to name the player, but what type of player, what position would that player play?
That's a great question. You want somebody that's going to make like a significant impact on the team. And so the offensive side, that's generally somebody that's putting up points, that's scoring. On the defensive side, that's somebody that can affect the QB or single on a receiver to, eliminate this player. So those are the ones, to me, if you're making the biggest impact, one that can put points on the board, or the rusher or the corner that can take points off the board by the style and the attitude that we play. But whoever that player is, I want them to have swagger of a commander, intensity, toughness. And when people people watch us play to say, hey, man, like, man, is that dude an absolute baller by the way he attacks it? And so those are things that I know win, and those would be the traits I was looking for. If it was offense, somebody that, is adding touchdowns, and defensively, the rusher that affects the QB, knowing like you got to go after the head of the snake, or a defensive player that can really guard people tight in the the moment of truth throws, third downs, 2 minutes into those spaces. So those would be the three most important factors to me, Kev, heading into it.
Well, not that you should care about what anybody on the outside thinks, but I think there are a lot of people that are nodding. Yes, yes, and yes. In that the conversations that they're having are conversations like, we got to get ourselves an impact pass rusher. We got to get more speed on offense. We need a playmaker who can score from anywhere on the field. And I think you added corner in there as well. So, anyway, thanks for doing this as always. It's much appreciated. Wish you the best of luck in the off season. Take care. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, man, it's awesome being on with you. I love our fan base, what we stand for, and so I can't wait to get rolling with everybody, free agency and the draft, and throwing an off season that we're really pumped about. It's just getting rolling for us. So let's go hit it hard.
Yep. Good luck. Thanks again.
Yeah, I'll talk to you soon, bud.
Dan Quinn, everybody. Up next, what a former Redskin said about why Seattle dominated New England. That's next. I got this from Rex. Rex wrote, Kevin, you were really tough on the Patriots. You were very mean. They were a young team, had a second-year MVP quarterback. Did you see that Adam Archuleta thinks the Seahawks knew New England's plays? Did you consider that? You weren't fair. I'm sure you must have had money on the Pats, and that played a role in your miserable take on Drake May. Rex.
Coming out guns blazing.
Seriously. Huh?
Coming out guns blazing with that. My God.
I mean, super sensitive Rex. I did have money on the Patriots, actually.
He was right, but...
yeah, you're right about that. I picked them not only plus the points in my smell test, I played them plus the points. I also played them on the money line, and I picked them to win the game. So you are correct. I was watching that game not very happy with the performance of the Patriots. And really, I think, I emphasize this because, yeah, some of it had to do with Drake May, no doubt. But for me, it was just, man, show up and play, show up and play to win. I mean, they just lost all confidence down the stretch in their quarterback, in their offensive line. I didn't say it was just Drake May, Rex. Right, sexy, Rexy? I didn't say it was just Drake May. I said it was the offensive line. I said the, receivers weren't getting the kind of separation they had gotten all year, and they were playing a great defense. There's no doubt about that. But it was also a terrible performance by Drake May. He had nerves, man. He looked completely rattled from the jump. But what he was referring to in terms of Adam Archuleta, remember him? 7 years, $35 million. That was the 2006 offseason where Vinny and Dan were giving everybody 7 years. I'm sorry, 5 years, $35 million, $7 million a year. Just, Antoine Randall, Adam Archuleta. Yeah, I mean, one non-contributor after another. Adam Archuleta they brought in to play a certain position that he had never played before. But Archuleta said, and Archuleta does a good job, by the way. I don't know if you've heard him call games on CBS, but he's actually pretty good. Adam Archuleta said, the more I watch the Super Bowl, the less I understand it. He said that Seattle ran a couple of their blitzes as if they 100% knew exactly, in capital letters, what the Patriots were going to do. If they had done anything different, it could have been a big play for New England. It doesn't make sense. I need to consult some defensive coordinator peeps tomorrow. I need answers. For what it's worth, he wrote, I'm not insinuating any cheating whatsoever. That's not my role. I don't deal in gossip. I only state my experiences and what I see on tape. I have no emotional attachment whatsoever to any team, and I strive to eliminate all biases. I do, however, have strong opinions and stand by my observations. For anybody insinuating I don't understand the game planning and film watching process of getting ready to play, yes, I understand Seattle watched film and saw tendencies, but they weren't playing the Chandler High Wolves. They were playing the Patriots, who happen to employ the coach of the year and the assistant coach of the year. I believe they have 9 Super Bowls between them. I'm just stunned that Seattle got away with some of the things that they did. And then he got into a little bit more detail. He said, one thing to have a tell, another to know so confidently that in 7-man pass pro sets, they would react a certain way 100% of the time, allowing you to blitz them in a certain way. Because if New England just slightly did something different, they would have gashed them badly. They never did. And it's wild to me. Yeah, that slot Witherspoon blitz, that seemed to get repeated and seemed to happen at the exact same right time every time was interesting. I really go back to my initial take, watching the game and then kind of thinking about it after the game. I just think New England was content with, if something isn't there right away, fine, take the sacks, take the, we'll punt it. We're in a 3-0 game. We're in a 6-0 game. We're in a 9-0 game. It's not over. And if we keep punting and we keep pinning Seattle deeper and deeper, number 14 is going to make a big mistake. He's going to make a killer mistake, and we're going to be able to pounce on that like we did in Denver, and that is our path to winning the game. Somebody pointed out to me, for all of your discussion about how New England played it safe, Drake May did throw the ball 43 times. He did. They were in a lot of long down and distance. They were also in the fourth quarter, late third quarter and fourth quarter, they went exclusively to throwing the football because they were down a lot. You see that. I mean, the team had 79 yards through three quarters. 79. And then he basically threw for 240 in the fourth quarter. So it was against soft defenses, et cetera. So that's not really what you saw for the first 9 drives. You saw a very conservative approach. I actually think in many ways it could have been even more conservative and productive. I talked to Jay Gruden about that on Monday, just about the idea that they could have gone more quick game. They could have, run more screens. They could have tried to run the football a bit more with Stevenson or even Travion Henderson, which they did a little bit more with Henderson in the second half. And maybe try to get him on the outside like Seattle did with Kenneth Walker III. I'm not saying it would have worked. It was kind of reminiscent of Washington's week 2 game at Green Bay when it's like, man, why didn't Cliff Kingsbury at least try to run the football? Well, perhaps he knew they couldn't really, run the football. But they also couldn't pass it, and they couldn't protect it. And that was New England's problem, is that in addition to, the rushing attempts not being super productive, sticking with it, maybe it would have ultimately paid off for them. But the problem is dropping Drake May back, even if it was for something quick and underneath. He didn't have time for that, and he didn't create more time for that. And when there were opportunities for the ball to come out, he seemed like he was seeing ghosts. Again, his performance and what I critiqued, I think, constructively, because it was objectively miserable, the performance, was more than just the Super Bowl game, Rex. It was more about his whole postseason. Objectively, it was one of the worst quarterbacked postseasons in NFL history. And, the numbers say it. Your eye test says it. If you watch the games, he didn't look anything like he looked in the regular season. Of course, they were playing better defensive football teams. Understood. But that just highlights the fact that the teams that they were playing in the regular season were primarily garbage teams that they were feasting on, and he was feasting on. Again, I'll say it. Thank God Matt Stafford won the MVP. I know it's a regular season award, but had Drake May pulled it out, had Sam Monson voted for Drake May instead of Justin Herbert, it would look silly right now after what you watched in the postseason. It would have been the worst performance by an MVP in the playoffs ever. And the voters would have looked silly, even though they would have said, hey, it's not a playoff award. It's a regular season award. Chris Nocky will join us next.
All right. Happy Thursday, everybody. We start off with quite a win from the Maryland Terrapins last night as they put an end to Iowa's 6-game win streak with their first quad 1 win on the season and their second conference win in a row. Maryland wins 77-70, and the Wizards, they fall to the Cavs last night, 138-113. Alex Sarr missed the game with right hamstring tightness, and the Wizards have announced that this will sideline him for the next 2 weeks, and he will miss the Rising Stars game during All-Star Weekend. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1. You can catch programs like Take Command all off-season. Don't forget to hit the like button whenever you do decide to join us and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
first win against a quad one opponent this year. And Buzz Williams and the Maryland Terrapins outlast Iowa 77-70.
Chris Nockey was on the call last night with Johnny Holiday. Maryland's win over number 25 Iowa, heard right here on the Team 980. A little bit of an early start to the game. Thank you, television. A little bit of a there may have been a seat or row or section available at tip last night, but an impressive win for Buzz Williams' Terps, the first quad one win of the season, and really their 2-game win streak here at Minnesota Super Bowl Sunday and last night against Iowa, in some ways has come out of nowhere. Joining me right now is Nockey, who was there last night. You were also in Minneapolis on Sunday. You and I have talked about how hard this team plays, regardless of, how many double-digit and 20 and 30-point losses they've had this year. With that said, I didn't necessarily see a 2-game winning streak over teams. Minnesota had just beaten Michigan State, and Iowa had won 6 in a row. Did you see this coming?
No, honestly, Kevin, I was at the point going into Minneapolis where I just wanted to be in a close game again, because most of the games, as you said, were routes. And so, you get to Minnesota, you're right there at halftime. I think it was a 1-point game. Terps were down 1 point and a half. And so you think, okay, cool. We get a chance to work on some real situations here. They kept the turnovers down and made some timely shots, and that's a big part of them being viable and having a chance at the end of these games. And then, damn if they didn't do it last night. I just thought that, considering how Iowa completely handled us in December, and that was when Pharrell Payne was playing, we never had a chance in that game in Iowa City. So you throw all that together, the fact that they're on a 6-game heater, they've got a great guard, first-team all-conference guard on their team. They've got, they got all these things going for them. Come into the game, shoot almost 52% from the field. You throw all that kind of into the mix. That's a terrific win against a ranked team on a heater.
Yeah, look. This is a season that's, was on pace to become the worst in our lifetimes of watching Maryland basketball. And maybe it won't end up being that. We'll see what happens here over the final month of the season. But, in watching them again, I want to go back to, sometimes look, the Maryland fan base has been all over Buzz Williams. And there have been maybe some legitimate reasons to feel that way. But most of it stems from the frustration of having a team that was blown out over and over again. But you were a coach. He hasn't lost this team. You could tell even when they were getting blown out against Ohio State and Purdue recently that this dude Solomon Washington and these guys show up to play every night. And the opposite of losing the team seemed to be the case. Do you agree?
Yeah, and the other thing is I have the benefit of traveling with these guys. And honestly, the effort that you see during games is just a part of that commitment that they have. And I tell folks, and I get a lot of heat, I get a lot of static from Maryland fans, and I get it. That's one of the reasons why it's such a great job, is because people care so much. And one of the things I tell them is it's hard to understate, or it's hard to overstate how much these guys love Buzz and love playing for him. And you can see it in that effort. You can see it in the way they treat Buzz and his staff on the road, and the way that relationship is at shoot-arounds and things like that prior to a game. And so, it says a lot about who he is, I think. And I know that there's some uproar about his press availability and things like that. As I've mentioned to you before, he's a different breed. He's not, he doesn't coddle the press, and sadly, there's not a whole lot of press to coddle around here anymore, with the Post going going out of business basically. But so yeah, it's been a mixed bag. But I will remind you, Kevin, one of the Maryland earlier this year had several games a losing streak in conference, and it was the first 6-game conference losing streak since Gary Williams' first year. And yet, one of the things that Gary was able to do late in the season, he was able to beat 10th ranked Carolina. He was able to win at Clemson. He put together a couple of wins that just kind of came out of the blue. And I'm not saying beating Iowa at home is the same as beating North Carolina, but I'm saying there are certain parallels that I is sort of feeling right now in the way the program is coming around.
Look, what you said, and we're talking to Chris Nocky, what you said about being around the team as you are, you travel with the team, you're with the team, that the players love Buzz. And our fans don't love Buzz right now. Let's be candid. By the way, it's not necessarily Buzz. Anybody that's 1-10, as they were 2 games ago in the Big Ten, and 8-14 overall, is not going to be, a fan favorite. But this is the same thing that we heard when they hired him, is that his players adore him. Why?
Yeah. Well, I think he's got the one thing that's common to a lot of, good coaches who endure. And keep in mind, Buzz has been at it now. He obviously has been to 3 different schools prior to, and he's been successful everywhere he's been. There's a passion that they have that is undeniable. And you watch Buzz on the sidelines, and he's right in front of me. It's hard to miss him, obviously, but he just, there's a passion to what he does. I think he makes it fun for the guys. I don't think it's drudgery. It's sort of one of those things it's hard to put your finger on all the time, but you know it when you see it. Gary had the same thing, an undeniable passion and thirst to compete. And it's just there. And these guys, as I said, they thrive on it even when they're not playing particularly well. And we certainly have had stretches of really poor basketball this year, but somehow, some way, they're sort of figuring it out right now over the last couple of games.
You and I talked about Solomon Washington, who missed the early portion of the season and then joined the team mid-December or something like that, whenever it was. And I was like, oh, God. And you said, really? And I said, yeah, there's just too many turnovers. He plays hard, but I've fallen in love with his intensity. Like, this is an undersized, just absolute battler. Like, he plays so much bigger than his size. I don't know how he does it. You watch it every night up close. It's not like it's a smooth operation, but just tell everybody who hasn't paid attention about this guy, Solomon Washington, who followed Buzz from A&M, was hurt early, but seems to be, on the floor half the game.
He's listed at 6'7". I think he's a legit 6'7". I think he plays much bigger.
Yeah.
Not only because he's got long arms, but he's deceptively athletic. But he's just got this attitude to him. First time I saw him play, it was in the gym last August. They were having workouts. They were out, the teams were able to start workouts basically in July, right? And so they were having workouts and short workouts. And Solomon was completely healthy at the time. And, you could tell, for instance, Pharrell Payton was far and away the best player on the floor, right? Best player on that roster. But after him, this kid, Solomon Washington, was just ripping kids up. And one of the great drills that Buzz has, and I don't know that they do it a lot in season, but they were doing it a lot out of the season. So one guy gets the ball at top of the key, the other guy is defending him, and you cannot go outside the width of the paint to get to the basket. And the defensive guy is responsible for trying to turn this guy as much as possible, maybe have him dribble it off his foot, whatever. Solomon just owned the drill, offensively, defensively, but particularly defensively. He was up in guys' face, and he was, demonstrative. And more important than that, he executed things to a T defensively. And last night with a game on the line, Kevin, he was the guy who took it upon himself to cover Sturtz. And Sturtz got his, but he also missed a bunch of shots down the stretch. And I thought maybe it was fatigue that had set in because he had to deal with a 6'7" defender for most of the second half.
In watching him over the last month, I've thought about if Pharrell Payne had played and been healthy, that duo would have been formidable defensively, on the glass, on the offensive glass. And then, it would have also been interesting just to watch Saunders with those two bigs in the game because he can really stretch the floor. And I'm not getting carried away here saying this would have been a 3 seed, but they would have been a lot better than their current record.
Yeah, it would have allowed the freshman guards a chance to evolve more. They were sort of thrown into the fire as a result. And the way the gods have it, Pharrell exits right about the time Solomon becomes available to you.
Yeah.
So you never really had it.
I think they played together in the Michigan game until Pharrell went out.
That's exactly right. And then remember, Solomon in that game was kicked out of the game
he got booted.
He got booted.
Yeah,
so,
when Maryland was up, actually.
Yeah, it's been that kind of year, man. It's been a lot has gone on.
Speaking of the guards, another guy that plays with unbelievable intensity and somehow wills his way to the rim over and over again and can shoot the 3 is this freshman guard, Andre Mills. We've talked about Coit and his scoring exploits this year, but Mills looks like, along with Adams, you got to have those two guys return next year, right?
Well, and that's sort of where the focus has got to be down the stretch of the season, I would think, is deciding what your roster is going to look like next year, who's invited back, who's not. That's just it's kind of where we are right now. And Andre Mills has been probably the biggest surprise of the year. And it's not, we saw, you could tell early in practice that he was a guy who loved to slash and get to the rim. The question I always had about him was, can he shoot the ball at all? And over the last 7 games, he's over 50% from the 3-point line. It's come around a lot. He's playing with a lot of confidence, getting to the foul line. He's also a lefty, which makes him a little tougher to cover. You just don't see that many guys of that size out there who have that skill set. So he's been a real pleasant surprise. Last night's game was remarkable. The stuff he was able to do, both around the basket, making shots, 3-pointers. I mean, he checked every box last night. Now, the trick for a young guy like that is to be able to sustain it. He's played pretty well the last 2 or 3 weeks. Let's see what he's got the next 2 or 3 weeks as, you get down towards the end of the season.
Maryland's won back-to-back games as double-digit underdogs at Minnesota Sunday and then last night at home against Iowa. And I know you've looked ahead here. The schedule's interesting. Like, they could win some games with the way they're playing. They have Rutgers twice. They have Northwestern. They'll be probably favored in 2 of those 3 games. And, Washington at home. They do have Wisconsin. They do have Nebraska. They've got Illinois. But I kind of feel, at least for me, I can only speak for myself, but I am re-energized about this last month of the season to see where it goes. What do you think it could be down the stretch?
I think it's going to be predicated on 2 different things, Kevin. And one is the turnovers, because there's no real point guard. And that will, to me, is priority number 1 in the off season.
Sure.
And you're not going to get a freshman to fill that role. You're going to have to pay somebody out of the portal, maybe 2 guys out of the portal for that spot.
Agreed.
And then the other thing is the shot making. And they're never going to be the shot making team that Iowa is or Illinois is. I mean, Illinois as a just pure offensive machine is really, really dynamic. So they're not built that way. But the shot making has to be timely. You cannot have a 5-minute lull in a Big Ten game. You're just not going to win those games. So, scoring regularly and not turning the ball over, because you just don't know. They've established sort of a way, a spirit which would, that they rebound with. I think the rebounding has been really good considering the size. They've been buoyed by the addition of, playing this kid Metcalf more minutes in the paint. And he doesn't have to be great. All he has to do is be good and block a couple of shots here and there and get some rebounds. And that's what they need out of him. So I think that their success and the lack thereof is kind of be dictated by, what you see in those areas probably.
Yeah, you nailed it with the turnovers. Those live ball turnovers that turn into easy buckets are their loss of possession, and they just lead to too many points. And that was a big issue for them for much of the year. Before I let you run, I know you're paying attention to the sport. What's your thoughts on Darren Peterson at Kansas and the missing of the game on Saturday with the flu, with the number one team in the country in their building? And the number of games he's missed for cramps. I mean, what's your gut on this?
Well, I will say that he might be, you put that aside, like he could easily be your lock number one pick of the draft, but you can't put those things aside.
Right.
And further on the whole flu thing, while they're playing, the number one team in the country, I had read that it wasn't even the flu, it was symptoms of the flu, which to me is like, what does that even mean? Because this time of year, everybody's banged up a little bit. Everybody's got the sniffles. There's just a lot going on out there, right? And so it seems to me that there's like maybe a wink, wink, nod, agreement between Peterson and Kansas about, about playing and not playing, but man, what a red flag, I would think, for NBA scouts to sit out. If you watch 2 minutes of that game against Kansas, Arizona game, that's the best atmosphere in America.
Oh my God, it was so good.
It was awesome. And Bill Self, right after the game, said, we won because of this building. It was awesome. And to miss that as a college kid, even if you're going to stay 1 year, man, that's painful. And I don't know what to make of it, Kevin. I will say that I know in talking to a lot of NBA people, we had a number of people in the building last night. And sometimes I wonder why, but they were there last night. And
Sturts is a projected first-round pick, isn't he?
Well, he's certainly a guy you got to pay attention to because he does everything well. He's 6'5". He's got good size for the position. But everybody, that is a topic of conversation among all those guys when they show up.
That's going to be a due diligence job that I said it earlier in the show, you're going to have to ask this guy why he sat out that particular game. You got the number one team in the country on your home floor. They're undefeated. It's as big as it gets in the sport regular season wise. And the only excuse would have been, and I said this earlier, if he's sitting on the toilet or he's, kneeled down next to it and he's incapacitated, that would have been the only legitimate reason. Seriously, because that's a major red flag. I totally agree. And yet, when you watch him play, it's just it's effortless.
Oh my word, yeah, and he's won games single-handedly. I watched him beat Texas Tech by himself down the stretch of a game. But it boils down to sort of that James Wiseman question, where it's rhetorical. You think, how much do you love the game? I mean, how much do you love the game if we're going to give you X millions of dollars and resources? How much do you love it that you would sit out an opportunity like that?
Yeah, agreed. Thanks for doing this. That was fun last night for sure.
Let's do it again.
Let's do it again. Let's get a couple more. Thanks. I'll talk to you.
All right. You bet.
All right. Chris Naki, everybody. All right. Football when we return. Is Washington season next year a contention season or a reset season? That's next. Jeremy Fowler wrote a story today on ESPN.com evaluating the 18 non-playoff teams of 2025. And the title of the story is NFL Overhaul Tiers. So he's got tiers for what's next among the 18 non-playoff teams. The first category, tier, was no need to panic. And the teams in that group include the Ravens, the Lions, and the Chiefs. So no need to panic is one of the tiers. Washington's not in that tier. Okay, the three teams, the Ravens, the Lions, and the Chiefs. A few moves away, right? A few moves away from contention, being in the postseason and contending. Cincinnati, Dallas, Indy, Minnesota, and Tampa Bay. So Washington's not in the tier of a few moves away. The overhaul tier of a few moves away, Washington didn't, in Jeremy Fowler's opinion, make that particular tier. The next tier was titled Sneaky Good Trajectory. So it's like a team which, man, you may not really know this if you weren't paying attention, but they're not that far away, actually. Sneaky, not that far away. Those teams are Atlanta, New Orleans, and the Giants. By the way, we have now covered, of the 18 playoff teams, we've now covered 13 of them. The next tier is titled somewhere between contention and reset. And there's one team in that tier, and it's Washington. Now, before I get to what Jeremy Fowler wrote about Washington, the last tier is in the middle of a rebuild. Cleveland, the last two tiers. In the middle of a rebuild, Cleveland, Tennessee, full-blown overhaul, Arizona, Raiders, Dolphins, Jets. Washington isn't, a team that no need to panic. Ravens, Lions, Chiefs. Few moves away. Nope, not according to Jeremy Fowler. Cincinnati, Dallas, Indy, Minnesota, and Tampa are in that category. Sneaky good trajectory, Atlanta, the Saints, and the Giants. And then in their own category, ahead of a few teams that are either in the middle of a rebuild or a full-blown overhaul, Washington's described as somewhere between contention and reset. And he writes, Jeremy Fowler does, the hope for a quick turnaround. Washington is a year removed from competing in the NFC title game. When healthy, Jaden Daniels is a top 10 quarterback who will move the offense into more respectable range in 2026. GM Adam Peters has cap space to replenish the roster. Injuries plagued Washington more than most teams last season. And then he writes why it might take longer than hoped. So this is, the first part was somewhere between contention and reset. The first part was contention. The idea that Jaden, top 10 quarterback, comes back, he's healthy, and maybe you contend, especially with the cap space to rebuild and replenish the roster. You stay healthy. You don't have another season with all the injuries. But then he writes why it might take longer than hoped. He writes, Washington was the hardest team of the bunch to evaluate, so it gets its own category. The Commanders were close in 2024. The roster is problematic in spots, though. Defensive impact players are older. Pass rush is a major need, and some recent high draft picks have been slow to develop. Peters has just 2 draft picks in the first 4 rounds this year because of previous trades. Adding a skilled player at tight end or running back would be useful. Yeah, adding, a skill and force at defensive end, pass rush, edge, adding another force on the other side of the defensive line, adding another corner, maybe adding a safety would all be useful. So my question to you is, the tiers are no need to panic, right? That would be the top tier for, to consider Washington for. And again, Baltimore, Detroit, and Kansas City are in that category. By the way, I agree with that. When you have Lamar Jackson and you have Patrick Mahomes and you've got, in Detroit, a lot of offensive talent in particular, with Jahmyr Gibbs and, certainly all the receivers, Amon-Ra, Jameson Williams, et cetera. You're close. I mean, they were close this year. Detroit had one of those seasons. They lost a lot of close games that could have easily gone the other way, and they could have ended up winning that division. I mean, they lost a 3-point game to Minnesota, a 7-point game at Philly, a 7-point game against the Packers. I think that was Thanksgiving Day. A 7-point loss against the Rams, a 5-point loss late in the year against the Steelers. I mean, those 5 games right there, you win 2 of them, and you are, right there maybe as a division winner. And they were a dangerous team. They were a dangerous team 2 years ago. They were a dangerous team at times this year. So personally, no need to panic is not the tier I would put our team into. The next tier, though, a few moves away, Cincinnati, Dallas, Indy, Minnesota, and Tampa, that's the tier I would put Washington into. I think they're a few moves away. Now, I think they're many moves away on defense from becoming a good defense. But I think they're a few moves away from being, competitive defensively, maybe a little bit more supportive offensively, and being in contention for the postseason because of their quarterback and because they might be healthy next year. That's the tier I would put Washington in. The next tier, sneaky good trajectory. I don't think Washington's sneaky in any way, so that wouldn't be the tier for me. And by the way, I agree with Jeremy Fowler on the Saints in particular. That was a much better team at the end of the year than maybe NFL fans knew. They were very good defensively, and Tyler Shuck really showed a ton of promise as a potential, upper tier starting quarterback in the future. Plus, they've got Olave. They've got some weapons. I mean, Alvin Kamara turns 31 this summer. That is a sneaky team next year. Their issue is cap space. They don't have a lot of it. Same issue is with Atlanta. They don't have a lot of cap space. And I don't even know if they're even sneaky at this point. I think everybody understands what Bijan Robinson is and what, their Drake London and Kyle Pitts is a free agent. Their offensive line, their defense, although, man, the story the other day about James Pierce, I mean, that career could be over. His future is, I don't want, look, allegations, et cetera. He got arrested in Florida on battery charges, stalking charges. So this could be James Pierce was a dominant pass rusher at the end of the season, one of their 2 first-round picks last year. Remember about James Pierce. Some red flags coming out on him in character out of Tennessee, which is why a lot of people said he slipped towards the end of the first round. Those may have played out real time and maybe, in a really bad way for potentially a victim. But Washington's not sneaky trajectory. To me, Washington is a few moves away. And in terms of where Fowler put Washington, somewhere between contention and reset, I don't know what, to me, the reset is a few moves. That's the reset. The reset's going to take place over a couple of off seasons. But right now, I think they're a few moves away from being a playoff team. I do. I think, it'd be really hard to if the defense was as bad this year, as bad next year as it was this year, to envision 10-7 or better, even though they were 12-5 with a bad defense in 2024. But to me, the tier, the overhaul, an 18 playoff team tiers for next year, it's not a no need to panic, but it is a few moves away. So your choices are no need to panic, a few moves away. I'd like to take sneaky good trajectory out of it because I don't think Washington with Jaden Daniels at quarterback is sneaky at anything. I think that they are a team that people are looking at saying, what are they going to be? Are they going to be what they were in 2024 if they're healthy? Or are they just missing too many pieces? on defense to be that. So the last category I'll give you is somewhere between contention and reset, which is where Fowler had him. So again, 301-230-0980. Are they one of those non-playoff teams where it's no need to panic? Or are they a few moves away? Or are they somewhere between contention and reset? 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Take your calls next on that. Max will give me his answer as well. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. ESPN.com today looking at the 18 teams that did not make the playoffs and putting them into tiers. Tier 1 is really no need to panic. The Ravens, Lions, and Chiefs are in that tier. A few moves away, Cincinnati, Dallas, Indy, Minnesota, and Tampa Bay is in that tier. And then there was this sneaky good trajectory. Atlanta, New Orleans, and the Giants were in that tier. And then Jeremy Fowler put somewhere between contention and reset Washington into that tier, saying, Jaden is a top 10 quarterback, and they were really injured, and they've got a lot of cap space, so that's the case for contention. But, they were a hard team to evaluate because they have a lot of needs, especially on defense. And then he writes tight end and running back as well. So I'm not going to use the category that he had somewhere between contention and reset as an option. It's actually a little bit confusing. The three options here are right now. The three options are no need to panic. All right. A few moves away or many moves away from contention. And contention would be for the playoffs and a chance to maybe make some hay in the playoffs. I'm not talking about a certified Super Bowl contender, but I'm talking about a team that wins 10 games or more and qualifies for the postseason. That's contention. Which tier would you put our team in and why? No need to panic, a few moves away, or many moves away. For me, I think it's a few moves away from contention, that kind of contention. I mean, they won 12 games with a bad defense 2 years ago. Maybe they can't replicate that because of, everything that went their way. But if they're healthy next year and Jaden plays 17 games and plays at a high level, I put them in contention just based on that. And a few moves, on defense to solidify a couple of areas, I think they're there. I think many moves away from being a certified Super Bowl legitimate, favorite. Many moves, and that's probably over at least 2 off seasons. But a few moves away from contending for playoffs, yeah. Max, what do you think?
So I think that we are definitely kind of falling in the middle category where we're just a few moves away. Jeremy says in the piece, Washington is one of the hardest teams to evaluate, just because I feel like everything went right in 24 and everything went wrong in 25. So we still don't really have a full readout. I mean, we know what we know, obviously, in terms of the team last year and kind of how they were producing on the field and what we need to do going from there. But so I do think that there are just a few tweaks and things that Adam Peters is going to do in this offseason to kind of get things in the right spot. And hopefully it starts a few weeks here coming up with the draft.
Yeah, I mean, they're a hard team to evaluate because they were so god-awful.
Yeah.
But the reason was their best players didn't play, and their best player is a massive difference maker. And so is he going to be back? Is he going to play all 17 games? And then what does it look like around him? To me, it's a lot easier to push Washington into that, few moves away or even, no need to panic than it is to put them below that line. I mean, they're below teams like Minnesota, who doesn't have a quarterback. Indy might not have a quarterback. Remember, Daniel Jones is a free agent again, coming off that serious injury. I don't know why Washington wouldn't be ahead of those two teams. They've got Dallas with a quarterback and Cincinnati with a quarterback and a few moves away. Cincinnati defensively is bad too. And Dallas was bad defensively. And Washington had legitimate justification for being bad last year, even more so than any other team in that category. So I'm a little bit surprised that they wouldn't be a few moves away. Tampa has a quarterback and they've got a roster, but I don't see him being fewer moves away from contention than Washington. I think it's a few moves away. Anthony in DC. No need to panic, a few moves away or many moves away from 10 wins or better and being in the playoffs and being, in contention for something.
They are somewhere in between a few and many moves away. It's right on the border because we still don't have, well, we do have a firm grasp on what the defense is. The defense sucks, plain and simple.
Yeah.
So
Well, that's where the few moves for me, that's where we're a few moves away from not sucking as much and then knowing what the offense could be if it comes back intact and it's healthy.
right. Well, it could not suck as much, but would it be enough to be in playoff contention? I mean, is two players going to be enough to put them in playoff contention?
Remember, it's not just players. They got a new coordinator, too. So there's some hope there.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So let me hit you with a little off-season utopia, buy or sell in this scenario.
I'm open.
So
I'm open for utopia business.
All right. So Trey Henderson, no more than a 2-year deal. Jalen Phillips, 3 or 4 year deal.
He gets hurt a lot.
Okay, but that's the most immediate name that
I like him. I love him as a player.
He
gets hurt. He gets hurt a lot, and he's going to get a big contract, because he is really good, don't you think?
Oh yeah. Now keep in mind when I'm saying all this, I'm saying it with the caveat that either before or after June 1, the cap space is going to increase because people will get cut.
Right.
And I understand.
Who else are you adding? Give me the rest of Utopia in terms of free agency.
Okay. Tight end, Isaiah Likely or Njoku. Wide receiver, Alex Pierce.
Yeah. Okay.
And the creme de la creme, Bain is there at 7. Buy or sell it.
Okay. That's I think, by the way, you just described a few moves away.
Okay.
Hitting on all those moves may be difficult. Thank you, Anthony, in D.C. Joe in Springfield. No need to panic. A few moves away or many moves away from being a 10-win team and a playoff team next year. Where does our team fall in terms of those tiers?
Hey, Kevin. So I originally was going to say no need to panic, but I actually going to change it and say 1 or 2 players away because, yes, the defense has got to be fixed for sure. And it's not going to happen overnight. But, injuries, that was the key last year. Hands down, the injuries. You have the players there when they're not injured, different team. And if you got to remember, Kevin, 2024, we won 14 games, including 2 playoff wins. 7 of those 14 games were like walk-off wins. And so we definitely got luck. 2024 was magical. I'll never forget it. But a lot of those were kind of luck. The Hail Mary. Devontae Smith dropping that passing good for Philadelphia, and we wanted to win that 36-33. New Orleans failing on the 2-point conversion. So those are luck games right there where and New Orleans even outplayed us in that game at the end. So I would say 1 or 2 plays away. But, yeah, I would definitely say if you got a healthy roster, 10 wins is definitely in there. But who knows, with the way the NFC was stacked this past season, who knows? But yeah, if Jaden is healthy and we have a healthy roster, 1 or 2 players away, but definitely a 10-win team for sure, Kevin. Take care.
Thank you, Joe. Period. Full stop on that, Joe, with a full stop on, going from no need to panic to a few moves away. I'll tell you, I'm closer to no need to panic than I am to many moves away. Because, again, the bar here is 10 wins, not 12. But 10 wins and being a playoff team next year. I definitely can see that. And I do think that free agency will be approached differently starting in a month than it has been the last 2 years. And I say that, and they did make some big trades last year, clearly, at the deadline with Lattimore, Tunsil, and even Debo. Aveen, no need to panic, a few moves away or many moves away.
Hey, Kevin, I got a few moves away. I think we're in much better position than any of the teams he listed on a few moves away. We have the holy grail. We have a young elite quarterback on a rookie deal, and we have cap flexibility. None of those other teams have that. That's as good.
Cincinnati's got cap flexibility, and And they've got Burrow, and they've got maybe the best, or certainly a top 2 or 3, starting tier wide receiver group with Chase and Higgins.
Yeah,
so,
but they're still a cheap, poorly run organization. I trust Washington over Cincinnati or Dallas. And so, I think what we have is what most teams in the league would kill to have, a young league quarterback on a rookie deal. And it's really only a few moves away. Like, all we need to do is get Jaden Daniels a competent defense. That doesn't mean a top 10 defense. That means a middle of the pack defense. And, we have the cap flexibility. Like, what happens if we sign Jalen Phillips and, we draft David Bailey and some of the young players from the team last year step up? This defense could look a lot different. So it's not that far away. And, my whole takeaway from this whole playoffs was there was a lot of lackluster QB play in the playoffs. And to me,
Matt Stafford wasn't lackluster.
He wasn't. He's the one guy. But even him, I don't think he was great.
Josh Allen wasn't lackluster.
I mean, he's had so many chances to win the game for Buffalo. I get it. It's a high standard. But to me, there's a big void in the NFC for like an elite quarterback to step into and just dominate. And all you need to do, we just need to get Jaden Daniels in the playoffs. Like, for baseball terminology, he's the only quarterback who can go in there and pitch complete game shutouts. And so it's just get him a competent defense. And if you get in the playoffs with him, you have a fighting chance to go to the Super Bowl because of what he can do and what he showed.
Aveen, what's an interesting question is this. Is an average defense more supportive of Jaden Daniels or another weapon or two? I think I could easily make the case that actually Jaden needs a middle of the pack defense more than he even needs another receiver or another, threat out of the backfield, because he's been, and the offense has been fighting its own team, fighting the other side of the ball for 2 years. They haven't been given short fields. They haven't been given points. They've been, in situations where they've been behind, and the pressure and the context of the next drive is so much different than it is if you've got an average defense. I think that and Adam Peters said this in that season-ending presser. He said to get the offense help, we got to get a better defense. I think that's more important than even, look, you're not going to do one or the other. This isn't a, pick one or the other. You're going to try to do both. But I think if you said you only got one, I'd take the middle of the road defense and say that would help out Jaden Daniels in the offense a lot more than another playmaker.
No, I totally agree with that. We're so starved of even seeing what a competent defense looks like. Like, Jaden has to be perfect. Even look at the Bears. Like, Caleb could be bad for 2 or 3 quarters, and he still has a chance in the fourth quarter because the defense isn't terrible. Like, we have to be perfect with Jaden, and just having competent defense, forcing like 2 or 3 punts a game in like the first couple 2-3 quarters. That's just huge. We've never experienced that.
It doesn't feel like it. I think the one team that I totally see as being a few moves away is Cincinnati. I really do. The Bengals are legit scary on offense when they're all there. And they've got the same issue we have, although they did have, even though he got hurt this year, they did have a pass rusher. Thank you, Aveen. Let's go to Kevin Arlington. Kev, no need to panic. A few moves away or many moves away. Those are the 3 tiers. Which one does Washington reside in?
So I'm between 2 and 3, more 3 than you are, meaning many moves. I think Fowler has hit it because there is that, 4 aces we could pull and go deep. There truly is. But Kev, let me just 2 things. One, I think a good comp for us is Cincinnati because offensively they are stacked at receiver. Offensively, we're stacked at O-line. And I think they're very similar teams in a lot of ways. I believe that. But I want to go back to a blueprint from 2004, which was the last time we spent big and spent successfully in free agency. Look at what Joe Gibbs did in 2004. We get defensive end Phil Daniels. We get defensive tackle Cornelius Griffin. We get outside linebacker Marcus Washington. We get Sean Springs to play lockdown corner, and we draft Sean Taylor high. Okay, that's the 5 guys on D, the 5 starters.
We didn't have
on
to
D
trade a pick for Brunell, remember. I'm remembering that correctly. It
was a third. It ended up being a third.
I know, but they were going to cut him. We didn't need to do that. He wanted to play for Joe.
Yeah, but I still thought we gave up a third to get him. But
that's what I'm saying. We didn't need to do that.
Oh, yeah. Well, there you go, right? I know. So it wasn't perfect, but I'm saying what they did defensively, that's the blueprint because we basically need those things. I mean, I'm assuming they feel with Kinlaw and Payne and Newton, they're going to run it back and it's going to be better. And you know what? Maybe they're right. And we'll see. But those ads at outside linebacker, at corner, at safety, brother, we need them. And the only other thing I'd like to say is why I think Fowler's is a good way of sort of looking at it is we have 2 rookie D coordinators. I mean, a D coordinator and O coordinator. Excuse me, 2 rookie coordinators. And you just never know, man. That's another one of those you never know.
We don't know. It was a third round.
I don't know. I see.
It was a third
we're reasonably
rounder for
healthy, Kevin.
Brunell.
I think we're a 9-win team, and we're one more offseason away from being a potential successful offseason away from being a true Super Bowl contender. But we got to stay healthy, and we got to kill it this year. We got to kill it next offseason. But maybe we
Kev.
can run it this year. We'll see.
Yep. Good call. Right now, where would you put Washington among the following 3 tiers of the 18 non-playoff teams this past season heading into next year? Meaning, where are they in relation to contention? No need to panic. A few moves away, many moves away. I got them a few moves away. I honestly feel like offensively, they have a chance to be great if they're just healthy, even without a lot of additions. Although I'd like more speed and more playmaking ability. And I do think tight end's going to be a big deal because I think Ertz was a big deal for Jaden in his first season. Not much of a chance to kind of connect with him in year 2. And clearly they got to get better on defense. Paulie, go ahead.
Hell to the W. Big guy. How you doing, man?
What's up?
Hey, listen, man. I'm with you, man. We a few moves away. You know what? Recalibration. I see us in the playoffs next year. You know what I've learned in this off season past couple of days.
What?
You know, with all these hirings and his moves and these press conferences and everything, it wasn't so much the injuries. Because you look at your second team, the 49ers. You know, they had catastrophe at positions with injuries and everything. But the difference between them and us is there was clearly a dysfunction, and from front office to coaching staff, from coaching staff to players, this team wasn't on the same page. If everybody was on the same page of what this team was supposed to be moving forward, I think the injury, it might have would have set us back, but it wouldn't look as bad as it looked.
Yeah, I completely disagree with that. The 49ers are a major aberration. They are literally the exception to the rule, a team that had that many injuries. And you saw that ultimately it was a bit fraudulent anyway, because the teams they beat to kind of get there weren't necessarily great teams. We went through their schedule. I don't have it in front of me now, but they beat up on teams like the Saints and the Falcons and the Giants and the Panthers and the Browns. They're the aberration. You cannot survive an NFL season when your best player at the most important position on the field misses 13 games, doesn't play start to finish 13 games.
How many games did Brock Purdy miss?
Again, San Francisco is the exception to the rule. You can't find many San Francisco examples over the course of our NFL lifetime of watching, including their teams following their 2 Super Bowl teams where they went 6-11 and 4-13.
There's a reason why Cliff Kingsbury is not back, because he wasn't on the same page as Dan Quinn.
That has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
That has to do with what I'm saying is that this team was not on the same page. Everybody wasn't marching in the same direction.
Yeah, but the pages were filled with characters that weren't supposed to be a part of the book. all year. That's the bigger issue.
It wasn't all year. It wasn't all year, Sheehan.
What do you mean it wasn't all year? They had
Maybe
the most
maybe
man
mid-season
games
on.
lost from their week one
Maybe
starting lineup in the
mid-season
league.
on. Look, but it didn't all happen at one time.
No,
like we
it
lost
happened
3 players
start
every
from
game.
the week 2 on. Wise and just week 2 on, and then by week 7 it was over.
The philosophy of this team wasn't on the same page. Everybody wasn't on the same. You see the difference when Darren Quinn took over for the defensive play calling. It looked nothing like what Joe Witt had did for a whole year and a half.
Two separate things. I agree with you they weren't on the same page. I agree with you that Quinn decided, and I asked him, you heard him, it was a gradual, getting to the point where he wanted to do something different offensively. But would they have been on the same page had their best players played the majority of the games? It would have looked more like they were on the same page.
Best believe they're going to be on the same page this year coming up. All right,
I hope you're right.
What Quinn wants him to do. The defensive coordinator is going to do what he wants him to do, and the GM is going to draft players and have the players play that he wants to have play. They wasn't on the same page. But to answer your question, I think they're only a couple players away. This offense thing, they may be missing like 2 to 3 players on offense, speed at receiver, and maybe another type of dynamic running back. I'm not worried about the tight end. I think the tight end thing is overblown. The tight ends aren't trash. They're average tight ends, and you can get away with average tight ends. Offensive line, fine.
I think what they need is they need to replace Zach Ertz, the pass receiver. They need the 6'5" 6'6", and maybe that's a K-Dot, and maybe it's somebody like that. But I think if you go into next year and you don't have a legitimate big target route running, pass catching tight end, I think that'll hurt.
It's not going to kill you, though. It's not going to kill you. You don't need a superstar at tight end. You need a solid player.
Well, I didn't say it was going to kill them. I said it's something that they need. Yeah.
Okay, I'm saying, but it's not something people talking about Isaiah Likely and Pitts. Like, you don't have to go out and spend all that money for a tight end of that stature. We don't need that. That money needs to be spent on the defensive side. I like what the guy said, Phillips. I'm rating the Eagles, the Kobe Dean, Phillips. You know what I mean?
I love Phillips. It's just that he's always hurt. That's my big thing with him. He's been hurt a lot.
But,
so he's going to get big money too, no doubt.
Maybe, maybe not. But defensive line is where we need to focus on. So like I said, we're a couple of moves away. We're right back in contention. You got Jay.
I agree.
The offense is good. We're good on it. It's just building this defense. So once we build the defense up, and you can see defense has changed from one year to the next, especially when you're going to have everybody on the same page.
Yeah, ours didn't change from 2024 to 2025, but you're not wrong about that. I got to move. Thanks. I got to get to a break. If you're on hold, stay there. Yeah, defense typically has much more variance year to year, and sometimes there's really no explanation for it. There wasn't much variance in our defense in 25 than there was, from 24. Both years, bad. If you're on hold, stay there. No need to panic. A few moves away or many moves away from contention. Which of those 3 tiers do you think our team is in? Phone lines are open, 301-230-0980. Coming up, I'm going to play something that Draymond Green said about the Wizards' recent trades and what he thinks about the Washington organization. You know, there are many people that think that Draymond might be traded this summer. What if he were added to that group? Daryl in Columbia, for our football team, where are they in relation to contention? No need to panic. A few moves away or many moves away?
Hey, Kevin, thanks for taking my call. I don't think we need to panic, man. You know, I think like Quinn said last year, just recalibrate. You know, I mean, you look at Chicago, you look at New England, you look at Seattle. I mean, you can redo this thing in 1 year. And, you know, to be honest with you, our offense doesn't look bad at all to me. Our line is decent. You know, they need to stop addressing Senate as a tight end and let him be an H-back and a fullback. He can block like hell. And with him and Bates and letting Bates start a tight end, we will have a really good ground attack. You know, I just think that our coaches didn't make the proper adjustments throughout the whole year. And I would take our free agency and our draft picks and just focus on the defense. And I think that we're going to see better results from those players that didn't do so well under the scheme of Witt and even under Dan Quinn.
You said something that I was thinking about when I was watching Durante Jones the other day, and he started naming players that I think some of our fans thought really stunk this year. It's very possible that a new coordinator with a different approach, with a different scheme, with different teaching, whatever, and just the general in nature, the natural, variance of defense year to year, that the same players that weren't very good this year could actually thrive next year. Him talking about Quan Martin and some of these players, we know that at times Quan seemed to struggle, but every coach is kind of like Quan. He likes him. And we were convinced Sandra still, after the rookie year he had, was going to be great. Changes, man. And I think that some of these younger players that were drafted and maybe played well year one, didn't play so well last year, I think there's a really good chance that they look completely different in a new scheme with a new coordinator.
I do too, and I think that's the defensive coordinator's strength. I think he's gonna get the best out of these players. Quan Martin ought to be a nickelback. You know,
well, I hope you're right. He's never been a defensive coordinator, but I hope you're right. I mean, I'm certainly hopeful. Put it this way, Daryl, couldn't be any worse than it was last year.
Hey, Kevin, I just don't want to see any more 3rd and 4, and our cornerbacks are 12 yards off the wide receiver. But yeah, man, I think we'll be fine. I think that I think that everybody's a little disappointed from our season that we just had, but I think we got the right coordinators in there, and what we need to do now and hope for is that we will make the right personnel choices in the draft and free agency and not overspend.
Thank you, Daryl. Good call. Appreciate it. I wanted to finish up this show by playing something for you. Draymond Green, this was his podcast, right, Max?
Yes.
He's got a podcast that he does, even during the season. And he weighed in on the Wizards. I mean, who's been doing that? Not many people, but recently after the trades for Trae Young and Anthony Davis, there's been some buzz around the league about what the Wizards are doing. This was Draymond Green talking about the state of the Wizards.
Wizards has acquired Trae Young and AD largely for next season. I can't foresee either one of those guys playing much at all. AD, if he's coming back from the injury that he sustained, he's probably still another 3 to 4 weeks away. You need to lose anyway. Washington owned their own draft pick this year. That pick could turn into A.J. DeBonsa. That pick could turn into Darren Peterson. That pick can turn into a great young piece for your franchise. I think when I'm looking at this, a couple things are going to have to happen. Washington's going to have to commit to AD long-term. Like, if you want to keep a player like Anthony Davis in Washington who's struggled to get free agents, you're going to have to commit to AD long-term. Depending on who Washington drafts, the situation could change a bit for Trae Young. This team could look completely different next year. You're talking about a team that's at the bottom of the league right now, completely different in a good way. Like, the possibilities are endless, but that is the sign of a good front office when you give yourself endless possibilities. And that's what Will Dawkins has done coming over from OKC.
Draymond Green might be available in the summer. I mean, I'm sure many of you would say no. I think Draymond's one of the highest IQ players of his generation. I think he's been instrumental in the Warriors' championship success over the years, even though clearly he has, a bit of an emotional problem on the court at times. But there is definitely a lot of talk about what the Wizards have accomplished here over the last 2 weeks. And as I said, for me, there was very little risk in really either deal. I do think, not to sound like last year's Adam Peters is playing chess checkers and then, a year later the fan base wants him fired. I do think there's a little bit of chess being played by Will Dawkins and Michael Winger. I think they're doing an excellent job. They have so many picks into the future. This pick this year is crucial. By the way, they have gained some ground here in the last couple of nights. I mean, the Pacers won last night. The Jazz won last night. We had the other night, the Pacers have won like 2 in a row. So the Wizards are sitting there right now with the second worst record, only 2 games better than Sacramento. This time last week, they were actually in the 5 spot. They got to finish in the bottom 4. I think most of you know that. And it's going to be a tight, fit down the stretch because there are some teams that are tanking just as much as they're tanking. Alex Sarr, by the way, out for a couple of weeks. But I truly believe that next year, heading into the year, especially if Anthony Davis doesn't get hurt, tripping over, somebody on the court, walking onto it for practice or shoot around, and he's out, during the preseason. I think going into October, there will be more talk about the Wizards than there has been in 9 years, excuse me. Got to go back to 2017 in terms of the kind of team they could be in the East. I think you'll see people picking them as high as 4th or 5th, maybe, 3rd in the East. 4th would be the highest, I think. Thanks to Naki. Thanks to Dan Quinn. Thanks to all of you. Back tomorrow. Chris is next.